Against the sudden, suffocating silence of the mess hall, one sound refused to stop. A steady, rhythmic scratching of a metal stylus against a glass datapad echoed from corner table 4. Trainee Ven froze. His medical biomonitor slipped from his four-fingered grip, clattering onto the sterile polyresin floor. I'll be honest with you. What my biomonitor recorded in the cafeteria, that cycle violated every law of predatory physics we knew. Not a single warning siren had been triggered. The station's internal security grid showed solid green, a catastrophic failure of the automated defense systems. Across the metallic grating of the main concourse stalked for Scarveth. 8-limbed ambush predators. Chitinous armor plating shifted with a heavy, grinding dread with every step they took. They did not belong in the civilian sectors of Station Kalen. Far from here lay the deep quarantine hunting preserves where they belonged. The other 3 fanned out, their secondary limbs clicking against the bulkheads as they sealed off the primary escape routes. They moved with a synchronized, predatory fluidness that defied their massive bulk. Behind a reinforced nutrient dispenser cowered a dozen Brinthek herbivores. Their soft, wool-like fur stood on end, a futile biological response to make themselves look larger. Their collective heart rates spiked on Ven's dropped scanner, painting the cracked display in urgent crimson warnings. Little Kalen, only 3 cycles old, trembled so violently he dropped a half-eaten blue fruit. It rolled across the sloped deck, leaving a sticky violet trail that stopped inches from a massive, clawed foot. 3 meters. Too close. Ven's own respiratory slits flared, desperately trying to cycle enough oxygen to keep his primary brain conscious. Protocol dictated he initiate a lockdown sequence. Terror dictated he remain perfectly, invisibly still. His secondary heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that threatened to give away his position. He could see the micro-vibrations in the deck plating, tracking the weight distribution of the beasts as they prepared to cull the herd. The air tasted stale, suddenly thick with the musky, acidic scent of apex predators marking new territory. At the adjacent table sat the human. Zoe. Humans had resided on the station for barely 2 local cycles. Small, unarmored bipeds. They lacked claws, venom, dermal plating, or even basic natural camouflage. Their bone density was average, their sensory organs strictly limited. By all galactic classifications, they were a Tier 9 prey species, requiring constant diplomatic protection just to walk the public corridors. They were known for their soft voices, their strange arts, and their endless bureaucracy. Nothing in their biological profile suggested a capacity for violence. The scratching of her stylus ceased. She did not look up toward the nightmare unfolding 10 paces away. A heavy, slow exhale left her lips. Her eyes closed for a fraction of a second. From her wrist dangled a simple elastic band. Lifting her arms, she gathered her dark mane of hair, looping the band twice to pull it tightly away from her face. Ven stared in absolute horror. Exposed was her vulnerable neck. The carotid artery pulsed visibly just beneath the thin, pale skin. A universal biological gesture of submission. She was offering her primary lifelines to the predators, yielding to her fate without a struggle. It sickened him, yet his own limbs remained locked in paralytic dread. In his preliminary xenobiology lectures, Ven had studied a theoretical concept: endocrine overdrive, a hypermetabolic state, one where chemical catalysts temporarily suspended tissue preservation protocols, sacrificing long-term muscle integrity for short-term mechanical output. It was considered an evolutionary dead end. No species could survive their own neurochemistry, burning them alive from the inside. The readings on his fallen monitor were beginning to fluctuate wildly, detecting a localized thermal anomaly he could not process, which meant the sensors were failing. The ambient temperature around table 4 was rising. A massive spike in cortisol and epinephrine flooded the sensor's limited range, originating from a source that should not have possessed those glands. The largest Scarveth lunged forward. Mandibles clicked in eager anticipation, tasting the air for Brinthek fear pheromones. The scent of ozone and rotting meat rolled off the creature's exoskeleton, suffocating the sterile cafeteria air and making Vin's visual receptors water. Zoe carefully slid a physical paper bookmark into the ancient codex she had switched to reading. She smoothed the crease with her thumb, adjusting it until it lay perfectly flat. Precisely parallel to her food tray, she set it down. A low growl vibrated through the deck plates, rattling the uneaten ration bars on nearby tables. The human, the Scarvith, ignored entirely. Prey that surrendered offered no sport, no thrill of the chase. The eight-limbed beast coiled its primary springing legs, the joints popping like stressed carbon fiber. It locked its multifaceted compound eyes onto the weeping Brinthek child. Zoe stood, her chair scraped backward. Sharp and abrasive, the sound echoed out of place in the tense standoff. "Hey," she said. The lead predator snapped its gaze toward her. Viscous saliva dripped from serrated fangs, sizzling faintly against the floor plating. It hissed, a sound like tearing metal, warning the lesser creature to stay down. Zoe laughed, a dry, humorless sound that contained zero biological markers of fear. "Oh, honey," she murmured. "That's not a knife." She stepped over the bench, interposing herself between the towering predator and the cowering herbivores. Her bare hands hung loosely at her sides, completely weaponless. The thermal spike on Vin's monitor shattered the display's upper limits. "That's a knife," she whispered. The Scarvith struck. With blinding velocity, scythed downward two serrated striking arms, each thicker than the human's entire torso. The kinetic force carried by that much dense, armored mass should have instantly liquefied her internal organs. His secondary eyelids Vin tightly squeezed shut, fully bracing for the high-decibel screams of the trapped Brinthek herbivores and the metallic scent of fresh blood. Never materialized the anticipated wet, horrific sound of tearing flesh. Instead, a deafening crack echoed through the cavernous cafeteria. Violently off the titanium bulkheads reverberated the sharp noise, rattling the loose nutrient tins on the surrounding tables and vibrating the very soles of Vin's boots. Forced open were Vin's ocular slits. The massive, razor-edged forelimbs she had caught with bare, open palms. Deep, parallel trenches into the reinforced polyresin deck gouged her heavy utility boots as the creature's sheer forward momentum drove her backward. She did not buckle. She did not break. Supporting thousands of pounds of predatory mass, Zoe casually blew a stray strand of dark hair out of her eyes. Slightly to the right, she shifted her left foot, adjusting her stance as calmly as one might fix a wobbly cafeteria chair. Every established metric of planetary physics the biological size flip actively contradicted. Rewriting the human's muscular output in real time was adrenaline, that volatile chemical catalyst deemed an evolutionary dead end because of the catastrophic cellular damage it usually inflicted. Against her pale skin bulged deep blue capillaries violently, rapidly flushing her arms a mottled crimson as the endocrine overdrive reached its critical saturation point. "My mom hits harder than you," grunted Zoe through severely gritted teeth, her voice deeply strained under the crushing physical weight, but entirely devoid of panic. "And she's a kindergarten teacher." Twisting her hips with precise mathematical calculation, she suddenly dropped her center of gravity beneath the creature's massive striking arc, raw mass leverage seamlessly replaced. Sharply on her left heel, she pivoted, pulling the wildly off-balance predator forward while violently driving her shoulder upward into its exposed, softer underthorax. Through the stale, recycled atmosphere sailed the enormous eight-limbed beast. Across the polished metallic floor skidded the broken apex predator. It crashed catastrophically into the reinforced atmospheric scrubber 20 meters away, shattering the high-density casing. In a blinding rain of electrical sparks, the immediate area was showered. To the deck heavily slumped the creature, two of its primary springing limbs bent at jagged, ruinous angles. Around its crushed thorax began to pool dark, viscous hemolymph, hissing faintly as it oxidized in the station's artificial air. Snap! A heavy thud. Silence. By the remaining three predators, a cautious, synchronized step backward was taken. Frantically from their crippled pack leader darted their multifaceted compound eyes. The brutal mechanical efficiency of the kinetic throw they clearly recognized. Apex violence they understood perfectly when they witnessed it firsthand. Completely stalled was Vin's primary cerebral cortex, his medical training failing to process the visual data. The exposed neck, the tightly tied back hair, a desperate biological gesture of submission it had never been. Eliminated were her peripheral vision obstructions for maximum efficiency in close-quarters combat. A universal white flag the simple elastic band was not. It was a calculated combat limiter, applied by a lethal organism preparing for immediate, close-range warfare. That specific, resonant sound of snapping chitin, no species present would ever forget. In that single, violent heartbeat irreparably shattered the established existential hierarchy of Station Kalen. As fragile scholars, the wider galactic community had viewed humanity for 2 local cycles. Now, from a single, completely unarmed female actively retreated the undisputed terrors of the deep quarantine preserves. If this was merely a civilian reading a recreational datapad, what horrors did their actual military soldiers look like? A terrible, highly precarious illusion the fragile diplomatic peace of the entire sector suddenly felt like. From behind the ruined, sparking atmospheric scrubber cautiously peeked out little Kalen. Entirely stopped trembling had the 3-cycle-old Brinthek. Beside his small, cloven hoof lay the completely crushed remains of his blue fruit, flattened to a paste. At the remaining predators, Zoe did not even glance as they scrambled frantically backward into the overhead ventilation shafts. Entirely on them, she turned her back, dismissing the deadliest threat on the station as a minor, resolved inconvenience. Into the stunned, suffocating silence of the cafeteria rebooted Vin's fallen biomonitor. Down to standard baseline temperatures cooled the human's internal chemical furnace. Slowly back to table 4 walked Zoe, her combat boots leaving faint, dusty imprints on the scratched polyresin floor. Up to the back of her head she reached, her pale fingers finding the exact tension point hidden within the dark locks. Softly snapped the black elastic band as she pulled it free from the intricate knot. Downward tumbled dark hair, falling around her shoulders in a messy, uneven cascade that obscured her face entirely. From the dented metal table, she picked up the physical paper bookmark, its edges slightly frayed from continuous use. To the exact marked page, she opened the heavy, ancient codex, carefully flattening the spine. Against the glass datapad resumed the metal stylus its steady scratching, the quiet scraping sound reclaiming the vast, empty silence of the cafeteria.